just powers from the consent of the governed. Where does the power to come from? The power comes from the consent of the governed. Governments are instituted among men. They get their power from the consent of the governed. So what's this saying? This is saying that unless there's consent, the government has no power. Consent is an agreement of the mind. Can silence be construed as consent? Absolutely. Can failure to object be construed as consent? Absolutely. Consent basically amounts to permission. So if we don't object to something the government's doing, then we're tacitly giving it its power to do what it wants to by a presumption of consent. Absent consent, government has no just power. Consent equals just, legitimate, right equals consent. Follow this equation. Silence is consent. If we remove our consent, the government's not acting with just power. Now let's look at this from more of an esoteric perspective. Let's look at this from a spiritual, universal natural law concept. If the government is acting without our consent, the government is in violation of the natural law itself. And the only way that the government can be consistent with the natural law is to persuade us to consent. So if the government has in some way persuaded us to consent to its operating outside the box, then it's basically operating with our consent. But if we remove that consent and the government continues to act outside the realm of the law, then judgment will fall upon that government just as any other natural law principle at work. But if the people continue to consent to our government exercising law outside the box, the people are ultimately responsible for the sins of the government because the people created the government, and the people are ultimately responsible because the government is a creation of the people. Without consent, government force is illegitimate. Let's talk about the e pluribus unum. Let's talk about the people. Let's talk about the many as one. We talked earlier about how a nation divided against itself cannot stand. We talk about Pledge of Allegiance. People say one nation under God. People talk about the American community. We talk about the e pluribus unum. We find this on every coin in the realm. It means literally the many is one. Now, every constitution in the country has a provision similar to this one. Now, let me say this. In the Colorado Constitution, you have the preamble. You have, oh, by the way, let me just read the preamble to you real quick. We, the people of Colorado, with profound reverence to the supreme ruler of the universe. Now, isn't that interesting? The supreme ruler of the universe is mentioned right off the bat, and they go on to basically say, we're going to do this, that, and the other thing to ordain and establish this Constitution for the state of Colorado. Article 1 describes the boundaries. Article 2 is what you're looking at right now. All political power is vested in and derived from the people. All government of right originates from the people, is founded upon their will only, and is instituted solely for the good of the whole. So what's the source of power here? According to the Colorado Constitution and every other constitution in this country, the people are the source of the power. All political power is vested in and derived from the people. Derived from to what? Derived from the people to the government. How is it derived from the people? Through the Constitution. The Constitution is an instrument that basically delegates power from the people to the government. Here's a couple of U.S. Supreme Court cases. The people as a corporate unit form an artificial person or body politic. Thus constituted, they form a moral person. Now this term body politic, let's not let that intimidate anybody. Basically what it means is a collective consciousness of individuals. It means a political body operating for the purpose of government, politics, politic coming from the root meaning city, polis. So body politic is the people coming together to form a political interest to where they then act to create a government that they can all agree on. So the people in this corporate capacity, in this corporate political capacity, form a literal moral person in the eyes of the law. The people is what the state is. The people is the state. And by the people of a state is meant all the members which compose that state and are integral parts of it together, making it a body politic. Why is this important? John Randolph Tucker was a PhD, had his Juris Doctorate in law. He was a professor of law at Washington and Lee University. During the 1800s, he lived through the Civil War. But some of these quotes that I'm bringing you from Randolph Tucker, they're not mine, and that's why I'm using him, because I'm just a guy, and this guy has some credibility because of his credentials. So I want to show you what his conclusion was when it came to understanding the E pluribus unum. Means the many is one, the whole collective body of people united under one common social and political life. It is an organism of unity comprising the many human beings. This organism, generally known as the civil body politic, is the commonwealth, state, or nation. This body politic, the whole body of people politically associated, is not the government, but is inherently vested by God with all rightful political power over its members for the common good of all. This rightful political power so vested is called sovereignty or supremacy over people and things. Basically, the people are king. The body politic holds the sovereignty and gives power to government. Now, the body politic doesn't give sovereignty to government. The body politic holds the sovereignty. It keeps it back. The body politic is the sovereign. The body politic in America, the people, the E pluribus unum, collectively, this is the master, the principal, the P-A-L, P-R-I-N-C-I-P-A-L, the one that's lost, the one that thinks that it's a servant to the government and has to do everything the government says. This is the body politic. This is the sovereignty that gives what to government? It doesn't give sovereignty to government, it gives power to government. And this power, again, is instituted through the Constitution. The body politic is creator. The government is creature. I could easily say the government is Frankenstein today, because Frankenstein has gotten off, run around loose, and the doctor that created it forgot that it was his. The body politic is principle. There it is right there. The body politic is the principle. If you're a member of the body politic, that means you're one of the principles. The government is its agent. Like any other power of attorney, the government operates by receiving this power to go out and exercise the will of its creator. Just like we're oriented to do the will of our creator, then the government is supposed to do our will. And how is our will expressed? By consent. And how is consent expressed? Through the Constitution. And if the government acts outside the boundaries of the Constitution, then our silence or capitulation or acquiescence, or call it whatever you will, our failure to object is to basically agree, and agreement is consent, as I showed you earlier. The body politic is master, the government is servant. Now again, this is John Randolph Tucker. Now here's the United States Supreme Court. The body politic is sovereign. The government is not. Destroy the government and the body politic remains. Now this is a very, very powerful statement, and one we really need to get our minds around, because the people are the most important reason for this country to exist. When I say country, I'm referring to America. Supreme Court Justice Field said, "There is no such thing as a power of inherent sovereignty in the government of the United States. In this country, sovereignty resides in the people. And Congress can exercise no power which they have not, by their Constitution, entrusted to it." All else is withheld. This is so important that we understand this, especially in the year that we're dealing with now, when an administration is basically doing willy-nilly anything it wants to because it feels like it can. You know, we've reached a day when the political party that gets into power, they go in and start messing with the mechanism of government, and they want to change it to their image and likeness, as opposed to just honoring the principles of the Constitution, which is what they were elected to do. The first thing they do when they get into office is take an oath to support the Constitution of the United States. The function of getting into the government is to honor the fact that governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed, for one purpose alone, and that's to secure to us the unalienable rights endowed upon us by the Creator. If you take that philosophy away, and you plug in another philosophy, And now everything is interpreted through it's a Marxist philosophy. You end up with a government doing whatever the heck it wants to do, and that's what's happening in this country right now. What is sovereignty ultimately? It means the buck stops here. It means responsibility. It's not just some, quaint, cool, feel-good type thing. It doesn't mean, power going to your head. It means exercising the responsibility that comes with being a sovereign.